Good afternoon, everyone. It is now time to start the TCFD Summit 2022. To start the summit, Mr. Nishimura Yasutoshi, Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, will give the welcome speech.
皆様こんにちは。経済産業大臣の西村康稔です。本日東京 GX ウィークの一環として第4回目の TCFD サミットが開催されますことを大変嬉しく思っております。日本は2050年カーボンニュートラルを目指すことを宣言いたしました。この目標の達成には産業革命以来の化石燃料依存の経済社会産業構造からクリーンエネルギー中心へ転換しつつ、排出削減を経済の成長発展につなげる GX グリーントランスフォーメーションの実現が必要です。他方、各国が置かれた経済的地理的事情は様々であり、実効的な排出削減に向けた取り組みを進めていくためには、画一的なアプローチではなく、多様な実態を踏まえて幅広い技術やエネルギー源を活用したトランジションを加速していくことが不可欠です。特に昨今の地政学リスクの発言により、世界のエネルギー需給構造が大きく変化する中においては、この考え方の重要性はますます高まっていると考えます。加えて、従来技術の延長線上にはない革新的なイノベーションの創出と社会実装を進めていくことも重要です。日本としては、こうした課題を踏まえながら GX の実現に向けてチャレンジをし、世界の脱炭素化に貢献してまいります。こうした取り組みを加速するためにも、ファイナンスの力は不可欠です。特に日本政府としては、TCFD を踏まえた企業の気候変動に関する情報開示を基盤に、成長マネーを呼び込むことを一貫して重要視しております。国際サステナビリティ基準審議会 ISSB において、TCFD にのっとった気候変動関連の開示に関する議論が進む中、我が国では TCFD 開示を実質義務化し、世界最大の1000を超える機関が賛同しており、積極的な開示を進めています。また、開示の質を向上すべく、実務の参考となる基本指針や、他排出産業向けのロードマップを策定しております。昨年の TCFD サミットでは、トランジションに関する情報開示のあり方を含めた議論を通じ、企業が気候変動を成長の機会として活用する取り組みをファイナンスで加速する必要があるという認識が共有されました。また、これらの情報をリスク評価だけに使うのではなく、気候変動への対応がイノベーションを生み出す新ビジネス創出の可能性、すなわち機会であるとの認識も共有されました。TCFD の中でどのように機会の評価を行うか、経済産業省では具体的な検討を進めております。このように TCFD を活用した開示が世界的に進み、気候変動関連の情報開示の枠組みとして TCFD 開示義務化の動きが進められている中、今回の TCFD サミットでは、機会の開示とその評価のあるべき姿をはじめとして、TCFD の新たな活用可能性の道を開いていただきたいと思っております。本日のサミットにおいては、世界の第一線で活躍される投資家と企業経営者の対話を経て、TCFD 提言の活用に向けてご議論いただき、適切な投資判断の基盤となる開示の拡充を促していただきたいと思っております。気候変動対策は待ったなしの課題です。この社会課題を新たな市場を生む成長分野へと大きく転換し、経済の成長、発展につなげる GX を実現することを目指すことが重要です。このサミットが建設的な議論の前進に寄与すると確信をいたしております。来年以降もこのような場を通じ、継続的に気候変動に関わる情報開示の取り組みが推進することを望んでおります。
Thank you, Mr. Nishimura. Now, we would like to move on to opening remarks. First, Mr. Valdis Dombrovskis, Executive Vice President of European Commission, will give an opening remark.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to speak at the 4th summit of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. Unfortunately, I am unable to be with you in Japan today. A great deal has changed since the last summit 1 year ago. Russia's illegal aggression against Ukraine is creating shockwaves around the world. That includes on energy markets and on people's cost of living. It makes Europe's green transition even more urgent. The EU has set out a strategy to address these issues, in particular the REPower EU initiative. The aim of the REPower EU initiative is to cut our dependence on Russian fossil fuels. It comes on top of the EU Green Deal objectives that include a 2030 target of cutting EU greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55%. REPower EU will raise the pace of climate action. It will expand our renewable energy and energy efficiency measures. It will help us to move to more reliable and sustainable energy supply. As before, we also rely on adequate finance from the private sector. So we are very much pressing ahead with our sustainable finance agenda. To start with, investors need the right information to make an informed decision. This is why our sustainable finance strategy focuses on disclosures and sustainability reporting. Here, the TCFD recommendations continue to act as an important reference point. They are incorporated into the recently agreed Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. These rules incorporate the concept of double materiality. Firstly, companies have to report on how sustainability issues affect their business. Secondly, they have to report on their own impact on people and the environment. Reporting standards are now being developed by the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, EFRAG. We want these standards to build on and contribute to international standardization efforts. We expect to receive EFRAG's final draft standards by mid-November. The European Commission should adopt the first set of standards covering all environmental, social and governance or ESG issues by the end of June 2023. A second set, including sector-specific standards and standards for listed SMEs, should follow 1 year later. We expect to adopt standards for non-EU companies in the course of 2024. The reporting requirements will be phased in over time for different kinds of companies. I would also like to mention the EU taxonomy classification system, especially in the context of high energy prices and supply restrictions. It gives clear definitions for economic activities that are considered environmentally sustainable, against which investors and companies will need to report. It already includes criteria for green investments in urgent areas, such as renewable energy production, buildings and construction, energy efficiency, and research on clean technologies. While our taxonomy system is a vital transparency tool, it is not an energy policy instrument. It cannot replace an effective energy or industrial policy. So far, we have developed a climate taxonomy system. We are now working to complement it with an environmental one. We hope that this will incentivize investment in the energy sector and other sectors at the heart of the green transition. As I said, it has become even more urgent to accelerate our green transition. The EU remains committed to reaching climate neutrality and will use all tools available to move away from high carbon emitting energy sources. Let me conclude by thanking you for the opportunity to contribute to your summit. I wish you every success. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Mark Carney, UN Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance, and the co-chair for the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, will also give an opening remark.
It is an honor for me to participate in Japan's 2022 TCFD Summit. I'd like to begin by thanking the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry for hosting this important event and for inviting me to share my thoughts on the evolution and the importance of the TCFD. I would like to begin, though, by honoring the memory of the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was a great believer in the importance of sustainability and who personally supported the development of the TCFD and climate disclosure. And I recall fondly and with humility his appearance at an earlier summit to lend his support. And I believe a great impact in terms of Japan's leadership in this and so many other areas in sustainability. Since last year's TCFD Summit, we've continued to make progress on the adoption of TCFD recommendations, providing the international financial system with the plumbing that's required to manage the risks and opportunities associated with climate change. We now have more than 3,400 companies worldwide with a combined market capitalization of over $25 trillion supporting this framework. That's a 30% increase from last year. And this uptake is global. TCFD supporters span 6 continents and 95 countries, helping to ensure that every financial institution and every financial decision can take climate change into account. Japan has been the leader, both through voluntary and regulatory endorsement of TCFD recommendations. Over 1,000 Japanese companies, 1,063 at the moment I give these remarks, they have provided TCFD-aligned disclosures comprising more than 30% of TCFD supporters worldwide. These companies set the example of climate leadership that firms in other jurisdictions are now following. Moreover, Japanese regulators have taken strong steps to accelerate TCFD usage. The Japan Exchange Group recently revised its corporate governance code based on the TCFD to enhance the quality and quantity of climate reporting. Measures such as these help guarantee that investors have the information they need to align their portfolios with net zero by 2050. The move from voluntary recommendations to mandatory disclosure standards is essential to prime the entire financial system for a zero-carbon future. That's why we should collaborate and celebrate governments like Japan's for enshrining the TCFD in law. It's also why we should applaud the IFRS Foundation's International Sustainability Standards Board for working to create a universal disclosure baseline building on the TCFD, a baseline that governments and regulators can easily adopt. Ultimately, the TCFD provides a strong, replicable process for integrating climate into the foundational components of the international financial system. Beginning with a voluntary framework heavily informed by practitioner input, we pressure tested that framework through broad private sector uptake, particularly in Japan. And finally, after accounting for the feedback from financial institutions and companies, worked with regulators to make the voluntary framework mandatory. In this sense, the TCFD serves as a model for GFANZ. At the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, or GFANZ, we are working with financial institutions to create a path for sectoral frameworks for financial institutions' net zero transition planning. We're collaborating with the private sector colleagues to refine this framework, and we're engaging with regulators to determine how to best enshrine our recommendations in standards and law as appropriate. This is strategy that draws directly on the successes of the TCFD. So it's the power of the TCFD not only to dramatically improve climate disclosure worldwide, but to inspire subsequent systemic change in climate finance. It's a testament to the work of everyone here today. Finally, tell you something you know. The clear, comparable, and decision-useful climate disclosure forms the bedrock of the green financial system. To manage the risks and seize the opportunities associated with the climate transitions, investors need that reliable information. And it's been inspiring to see the TCFD fill the climate information gap over the past 5 years. As we approach COP27, I look forward to the TCFD continuing to make an impact, spearheaded by Japan's unwavering ambition, leadership, and commitment. Thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Mary Shapiro, Head of the TCFD Secretariat, Vice Chair for Global Public Policy at Bloomberg, and Special Advisor to the Founder and Vice Chair, Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, will give an opening remark.
It's a pleasure to join you and represent the TCFD for the 4th Annual TCFD Summit. Thank you to Mehdi for once again hosting this important event. Since the world's first TCFD Summit in October 2019, we've made significant progress in rewiring the financial system to account for the risks and opportunities posed by climate change. Today, TCFD recommendations are backed by over 3,400 supporters across 95 jurisdictions, driving action at a global scale. In just 3 years, from 2018 through 2021, the number of TCFD supporters has skyrocketed by 410%. Japan, in particular, continues to play a leading role in accelerating TCFD adoption. With 1,063 backers of TCFD, Japanese companies account for over 30% of TCFD supporters. Japanese regulators have also contributed significantly to the uptake of TCFD recommendations. As I highlighted last year, in June 2021, the Japan Exchange Group revised Japan's corporate governance code to enhance the quality and quantity of climate-related disclosure based on the TCFD. This important step forward has inspired similar regulatory action around the world. We have now reached a tipping point, moving from voluntary frameworks to mandatory disclosure requirements. This year, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission released draft climate disclosure rules based on the recommendations of the TCFD. The European Financial Reporting Advisory Group has also drawn on the TCFD for its proposed sustainability reporting standards. And importantly, the International Sustainability Standards Board has grounded its efforts to create a global climate disclosure baseline in the TCFD, creating the conditions for broad TCFD adoption across a wide array of jurisdictions. These efforts will provide investors with the comparable, specific, and decision-useful information they need to manage the transition to net zero emissions. Ultimately, credible, standardized climate data is essential to guaranteeing the health and stability of financial markets in a world threatened by climate uncertainty. But given the existential implications of the climate crisis, our work is not finished. We cannot rest on the successes of the past without ensuring future follow-through. As we approach COP27 in Egypt, we must continue to support regulators in translating TCFD recommendations into mandatory standards. And with appropriate rulemaking in place, we should continue to support companies in providing the information investors and markets need to manage climate risk and opportunity. I am confident that with the momentum continuing to build, we will reshape the financial system so that every investment decision takes climate into account. Transformation on this scale is critical to confronting a challenge as monumental and multifaceted as climate change. Thank you again to Mehdi for facilitating this valuable conversation and promoting climate leadership both in Japan and around the world. Your sustained commitment to the TCFD and climate disclosure more broadly sets a strong example for others to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Ronald O'Hanley, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, State Street Corporation, will give an opening remark.
Hello, I am Ron O'Hanley, Chairman and CEO of State Street. I'm honored to be with you today, and I would like to thank the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, along with the TCFD Consortium and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development for convening its 4th annual summit. The world never rests, and the work the TCFD does has never been more important. We saw this over the past 2 years as the COVID-19 pandemic underscored the necessity of resiliency and sustainability goals. And we continue to experience it today as worldwide geopolitical events, namely the war in Ukraine and rising global inflation, complicate the path toward net zero and an effective energy transition. For those reasons, I am pleased to note 2 significant points of progress that have been made in Japan since last year's summit. First, since the TCFD's disclosure requirement began in April, that effort has progressed well and improved the quality of disclosures. And second, the development of the roadmap in accordance with various emissions for Japanese companies to determine their transition strategy, which in turn is enabling financing using these frameworks. And across the globe, we have seen further endorsement of the TCFD framework, ranging from the ISSB's proposed framework based on TCFD and SASB to the SEC's proposed climate disclosure rule that builds off TCFD to the UK's TCFD-aligned disclosure rules. That said, we recognize that measurements aren't static, and we must continue to refine how we measure progress. State Street has been deeply engaged around ESG issues for some time, and our approach aligns with our various roles. First, as an asset manager, second, as an asset servicer, and third, as a responsible corporation and active industry partner. We take State Street's ESG disclosure and goals seriously as an organization, and recognizing that ESG factors constitute a risk to be evaluated along with other investment risks, we are advocates for better and more consistent disclosures. On behalf of everyone at State Street, I was very happy to recently celebrate our 40th anniversary in the Asia-Pacific region. Like Japan's institutional investors, State Street is a long-term investor. Our role is to help investors navigate through climate risk. Our focus is on helping our clients create long-term value as they provide the necessary capital to the climate transition. We do appreciate how challenging it can be for clients and markets to grapple with balancing short to medium-term economic growth and employment issues while considering climate change as an important lens through which to view long-term investment and risk mitigation. In 2017, State Street committed to adopting the TCFD principles as a strong investor-led framework for reporting on our own management of climate change risk and the transition to a net zero carbon world. And in 2018, State Street Global Advisors, our asset management division, began asking portfolio companies to disclose climate risk using the same TCFD framework. Since then, State Street Global Advisors has also asked its portfolio companies to report on how they are managing climate change risks within the TCFD framework. I believe that climate change is the most important investment risk facing investors today. Divestment is not an answer because high-emitting industries need capital to mitigate emissions. Therefore, TCFD is a vital tool to enable us to invest effectively through this transition. On behalf of everyone at State Street, I am grateful to the TCFD Consortium for the important work it is leading. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you. Next, Professor Ito Kunio, Chair of the TCFD Consortium and Director of Hitotsubashi CFO Education and Research Center, will give an opening remarks. Professor Ito, please.
Thank you. As the chair of the TCFD Consortium, which is co-host, I'd like to express my deep gratitude for being able to convene the 4th TCFD Summit 2022 today. Since the last TCFD Summit 2021, the environment surrounding climate change disclosure has changed significantly due to the net zero declaration of countries and companies. Since COP26, held in November last year, there have been concerted efforts on addressing climate change, such as one by International Financial Reporting Standards, IFRS Foundation, which is in the process of establishing unified standards for disclosure methods based upon TCFD. In light of these trends, the momentum for TCFD disclosure is increasing. The number of supporting organizations worldwide has reached more than 3,640. And the number of supporting organizations in Japan has exceeded 1,000, almost double the number last year, and is the highest in the world. In Japan, the Corporate Governance Code was revised in June last year, and disclosure in accordance with TCFD is required for companies listed on the prime market of Tokyo Stock Exchange since April this year. The fact that TCFD has effectively become mandatory shows a new wave of support. Not only does Japan have a large number of supporting institutions, but the quality of disclosure has been steadily improving. The TCFD consortium, whose membership consists of about 20% non-financial companies, is establishing a trend in which companies voluntarily take active measures against climate change and disclosure information. From now on, it is expected that efforts to further strengthen disclosure, such as so-called Scope 3 disclosure and industry-specific disclosure requirement. The TCFD consortium has brought together companies engaging in disclosure based upon TCFD recommendations and investors which use such disclosure. As a result of that, the consortium has developed and revised the TCFD guidance and the Green Investment Guidance. Today, we are pleased to announce the publication of TCFD Guidance 3.0, which is a revision of TCFD Guidance 2.0, published in 2020. TCFD Guidance 3.0 is a thoroughly revised document incorporating commentary on TCFD disclosure, achievements of the TCFD consortium, and the latest findings, and has also included the latest trends as addendums. Recommendations for disclosure by industry are now included in a separate volume, and the content has been updated to be more compact while enhancing it, making the structure more user-friendly for companies that are in the process of expanding their disclosure TCFD based on TCFD and industries. Other initiatives of the consortium include providing opportunities for companies to accumulate knowledge and respond to the increase in the number of member companies, and providing information and exchanging opinions that contribute to the promotion of TCFD disclosure and utilization of information, such as video-based description of trends and climate-related information disclosure. Looking ahead, we affirm the importance of the three initial objectives of the TCFD consortium. First, initiatives for members. Second, initiatives for non-members. And third, international collaboration and dissemination. Based on this, we intend to examine ways to enhance information sharing for members, improvement of the quality of disclosure and utilization, and dissemination activities, including non-members organizations, in light of the issue at hand. Furthermore, as the number of member companies increases, expectations for the consortium are becoming more diverse, and we are considering various programs to cater to various needs, such as supporting initial TCFD disclosure, training of key personnel for sustainability management, and forum of management executives. As the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation is also in the process of developing a set of disclosure standards based upon TCFD. The consortium, as the world's largest organization of TCFD supporters, would like to further support the disclosure and use of climate-related information in partnership with the world. This year's summit will discuss the role expected to investors in responding to the challenge of achieving decarbonization while energy policies are being reviewed throughout the world. Specifically, with regard to disclosure, it is important to establish a framework for disclosure and evaluation, not only of risks, but also opportunities, and put it into practice. Furthermore, we expect active discussion on mechanisms that will enable companies to properly evaluate their GX, green transformation initiatives, for the medium to long term, such as development of innovation technologies. Through today's discussion, we expect that companies will enhance their TCFD disclosure, that financial institutions will properly assess them, so that the necessary funds will be provided to address climate change. Thank you. Enjoy the summit.
Thank you very much, Professor Ito. This is the end of the welcome message and opening remarks. Now we would like to move on to opinion exchange. In this program, Mr. Mizuno Hiromichi, Special Envoy of UN Secretary General on Innovative Finance and Sustainable Investments, and Mr. Emmanuel Fabel, Chair of the newly created International Sustainability Standards Board, had online opinion exchange.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 4th TCFD Summit. My name is Hiro Mizuno. I'm a UN Special Envoy on Innovative Finance and Sustainable Investments. First of all, I would like to congratulate for TCFD Consortium and Ministry METI and FSA and Ministry of Environment of Japan, who has been really supporting and is championing the effort of the global TCFD reporting initiative. Today, we have such a privilege to have newly appointed the chair of ISSV, International Sustainable Standard Board, which is organized under IFRS. My friend Emmanuel Fabel. I always had trouble with your last name pronunciation in French, but please forgive me. I always pronounce your last name wrong. But my friend Emmanuel, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your very kind welcome, Hiro. I'm a great fan of TCFD, and so I'm delighted to be part of that discussion. And again, congratulations, as you said, to the TCFD movement in Japan. It's truly unique and inspiring.
Thank you. So let us start with the reflecting what we try to achieve in Japan ever since this TCFD Summit or like a TCFD consortium movement started. Now, believe it or not, there are more than 1,000 signatories from Japan to this TCFD initiative, and probably that accounts for almost 1/3 of global signatories. So such a tremendous success, that we managed to show to the world. And then these like a voluntarily, the gathered group like TCFD consortium worked with the government trying to, as you know, the TCFD, the principle or guideline is a quite high level, the high context framework. So it's just basically requires the early, organization which trying to implement to take a lot of make a lot of judgment. But it was a great framework, and then we are hoping that that's continue to contribute to make the corporate disclosure on climate risk and opportunity will be more, more sort of comprehensive and a more, kind of like easier to understand for the investors to use for their financial analysis. But at the same time, that there's a lot of increasing frustration among the particularly corporate executives that they receive dozens of questionnaires from the different organization or different ESG, analysts or financial institutions, and then they are trying to work with the TCFD, but they hear a lot of noises, including this ISSB and SEC public comments, and started getting a little bit concerned about whether their efforts on the TCFD could be sort of wasted, or it will give them an opportunity to jumpstart. But I think, it's really good to hear from you, Emmanuel, that what you see from your side, and obviously, spend, take a couple of minutes to describe your role and what the ISSB want to achieve.
Thank you very much, Hiro. And I would very much echo what you said about both the inspiration of TCFD and the frustration for having a great framework, but not detailed disclosures that would be aligned as much as TCFD has been able to align many companies, as you described. So that is the reason why actually ISSB was created and announced in Glasgow COP26 last year. It was sponsored by the G20 leaders, the Financial Stability Board, IOSCO, and a number of multilaterals like IMF, the World Bank, the UN, OECD, and others, but also more than 40 different jurisdictions, with one simple but very difficult mission, which is to consolidate the universe of ESG language and create a global baseline of ESG language across the world that global investors, global companies can speak together in order to address the material topics of not only their climate issues, but broader ESG issues. So this is what and why we've been created for. We have a board membership now, which is completed with actually a great Japanese executive, Komori-san, who come from GPIF, and a number of others. So 14 of us are now working. We are not building from scratch. We started actually by also consolidating some of these ESG and climate-related private organizations. So the CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, CDSB, is now consolidated within our remit. The SASB industry standards that are well known in Japan and beyond, and a lot in the US actually, are now part of the ISSB. The integrated reporting framework is now part of ISSB, and we will probably continue. We're also working hand in hand with GRI on the impact materiality side, so as to provide a coordinated language for both investor materiality and impact materiality users. In essence, that's what we're doing, and we have already proposed, as you mentioned, this consultation of our IFRS S1, Sustainability 1, foundational standard, and S2, which is about climate. We've got actually lots of discussions, including with Japanese preparers, investors, but also regulators through outreach engagements, various platforms, but also formally some contributions to our consultation. And our next page agenda now is to redeliberate on that feedback that we received. And we continue to aim to make most of our critical decisions on those two standards final by the end of this year.
I see. So you are kind of like rather than trying to create the whole new standard, you're just trying to like integrate and make the best use of already existing initiative. But can I just confirm that obviously some of the standard or like some of the information requirement can be either added or deleted for you to come up with the final standard set by ISSB. But you think like what part of the TCFD you think will remain as the core frame of ISSB climate disclosure?
Well, thank you for asking, Hiro. It's obviously very topical for this audience and this important fourth summit in Japan. TCFD is front and center of what we do. By the way, I should have mentioned that among the leading organizations that influenced and advocated for the creation of ISSB, TCFD has been absolutely critical. In so many words, TCFD is looking at ISSB as their legacy from a standard setting standpoint. There were debates within TCFD. Should we go from this broad framework that you described to standard setting? And they decided that they should remain as a framework and the standard setter would be the ISSB. So what I can say with that is that TCFD, as you know, is the secretariat now is within the Financial Stability Board. We have lots of conversations. I report to the board very often about our progress. So TCFD is very much still involved in what we do. They are issuing regular monitoring reports about the progress of the standard setting of ISSB. The next report from TCFD Global Organization about where are we on the standard setting legacy of TCFD is going to be issued in October. And so they are still very, very actively monitoring what we do. Now, in the substance, I have to say, TCFD is about climate to start with. But we were of the view that this framework is so powerful that we don't want to use it only for climate. So we took it from climate and we made it part of our IFRS S1 proposal, the foundational. So TCFD framework will be applied to all ESG topics, not only climate, by ISSB. So it's really absolutely in the DNA of the ISSB.
I see. Well, that's very the encouraging, and it saved my face too, because I kept the promoting this, and I promised them it will remain as a core framework. So that's good. One of the things when we work together on many ESG initiative, you and me, and we look back 5-6 years ago, we were still debating whether the ESG should be a center of the investment strategy, and now nobody really argue, at least in public. But on the other hand, we started getting a lot of the pushback saying that there are so many ESG washing, and then the people uses the lack of standard disclosure matrix, the reason why there are so many sort of ESG washing and etc. Or also it only made the analyst do ticking box exercises. So I think we just need to address the both side of the criticism. But what is your expectation that let's say moving into 2023, ISSB will try to finalize the climate disclosure part of your whole program or for the whole guideline. What do you think how it will benefit that debate? Do you think the investor will be hey, okay, now we got them. So there was no, the room for debate whether the climate, disclose climate, the risk and opportunity should be or can be in their financial or investment decision. Do you think that's kind of like the immediate reaction or like an immediate impact that the ISB report, that will be making, or do you think it's going to be a bit more gradual?
It's hard to say, Hiro. I think that on climate, there can be a tipping point pretty early. Our role is not only to establish and propose standards. They are also endorsed by IOSCO. IOSCO is obviously, with all their membership around the world of more than 100 market regulators, is the critical element of the progress of the adoption, of course. So that's on one side, and this is about regulatory mandatory adoption. But you also have a theory of change of market adoption. If I'm back to the SASB standards, SASB standards are being used by now 50% of the 1,200, the S&P Global 1,200, for instance. And you refer to so many companies and partners in Japan that are using TCFD, for instance. Or you take GRI, which is being used by more than 10,000 organizations around the world. Mm-hmm. So I think we can see that there is already, consolidation. The SASB adoption, for instance, continues to grow, month after month by 70 or 100% compared to last year right now. So your point about there is, a consensus about climate, I think, yes. Even though there are political challenges and reputation challenges and, none of this is linear, but I think CEOs and boards understand more and more the extent to which climate risks and opportunities do matter for their business and therefore do matter for their investors and their banks. With Financial Stability Board, for instance, and the Network for Greening Financial Services, which is looking at the financed emissions and how the temperature of portfolio will be in the future, you might end up with a cost of capital issue if you do not address properly your climate risks and opportunities, either from a banking side or from an equity side. So this can lead to your own market adoption, voluntary adoption, even though your country has not mandated it, because your competitors around the world are already using it and you want to be at the level playing field when you want to access global capital. Is that going to be a huge immediate wave or a longer wave? I don't know. But the one thing that I think is essential on climate in particular is to align on the core metrics and the core framework. For me, the framework is very clear. That's TCFD. And I hope, that we can say that's a done deal. I'm not sure yet. We all have to finalize our standards. Europe, for instance, is using a bit of TCFD, but is not at TCFD as such. We are talking to them as we speak about those topics. And then the next is really to agree on the critical metrics to, for the transition, how to calculate the emissions, et cetera, et cetera. Subject to that, we will see. But I think we can see ourselves in a situation 3 years from now where capital allocation on global capital markets has started to shift towards the transition thanks to the disclosures that are being used by investors and banks in order to provide appropriate capital at the right price.
So you just touched upon the transition finance, and that's been sort of one of the area of interest in Japan. And just to be honest, and when we started the promotion of TCFD or the sustainable investment, one of the hesitation I observed among Japanese business leaders as well as the governments is that whether we can secure the finance when the business is going through the transition. So I think the transition finance is one area of the specific interest of the Japanese the business community as well as Japanese government. Do you think this let's say ISSB standard will actually facilitate the discussion between the corporates and investor or the financier to talk about the transition plan rather than they use the new data set to just kind of eliminate some of the company from the portfolio. So that has been always a concern among the corporate executive, not only Japanese, but abroad. So transition finance is something we probably need to facilitate having more specific data, because a long-term plan is actually, you can be a little bit vague, but transition, you have to be very clear about what you're financing. So do you think this, your effort of bringing a ISSB disclosure matrix will promote that, or do you ever discuss with your colleague that's being taken into consideration when discuss the standard?
Yes, the answer to this question is yes, Hiro. We have seen through the consultation that there was a need for companies to understand how that could create the financing of transition pathways for them. Mm-hmm. When they have to reskill so many employees, to invest in new technologies, right, to maybe dispose of some businesses, etc. And so, yes, the whole purpose of ISSB is to create cost-effective for preparers, decision useful for investors and bankers, disclosures that will help that dialogue and agreement on what is the business plan, and therefore what is the cost of capital for that business, and how much money is required to the transition. There are two elements in our proposed standards on climate that can serve that purpose. One is the direct aspect in our S2 standards on the proposal on climate about transition plans and pathways, where we are right now discussing and making more details about what they need to be disclosing for that discussion to happen properly, with due concerns about confidentiality potentially. But, if that is a big transformation for the company, there's no doubt that investors will want to know. And as much as when you go for a big merger or an acquisition, you have to share what your synergy plan is going to be and where they're going to become, whether you're mandated by the accounting standards or whether that simply investors wanting to be understanding that. So it's a little bit like this. So we're working around that way on the transition pathways descriptions in our disclosures. And the other one is the financed emission part for the banking and the insurance and the investor side, right, on which, of course, that's an indirect way. But of course, they will have to deal with how many of their portfolio is going to be stranded assets, how many of their portfolio is definitely what they want to invest in, and what is the mainstream in the middle, where I think the pathways will be an important topic to discuss, for the continuation of the financing of those industries. So I think it's not like it's black and white. If I reveal that, I'll be, I won't have financing anymore. But really an encouragement to be proactive and anticipating the fact that this will come. Because climate is a global risk, whether we want it or not, it is there, and it will ultimately translate into the cost of financing one way or the other.
I see. Well, that's quite, the strong message you just brought, because there's always the concern and expectation always exists together in this kind of a new initiative. And then the one thing I just want to ask is, so you have to go through the IFRS process of getting involved in each constituency and having them endorse and those process. So your a best case scenario, what is a kind of a time frame for the Japanese FSA or maybe Japanese stock exchange would be able to make it the official disclosure, the rules for, let's say, Japanese companies. What is the best case scenario time frame?
Yeah, if I may, Hiro, just before that, to inform that question, one aspect we did not discuss, and I should have mentioned as part of what I just said before, is that in parallel of everything I described, we are working on the scalability of the standards, because it will work if it's a truly global standard. You know, the language needs to be spoken on a global basis if we want capital to flow seamlessly for companies. And therefore, it means we also need to embark the smaller entities. We need to embark the emerging economies. And we're working on a scale of scalability, basically, and progressivity and proportionality as implementation guidance for jurisdictions to adopt. And that is the answer to your question about Japan or other jurisdictions. Also, for me, depends on how flexible are we going to be in our implementation guidance about this timeline and embarking smaller entities, etc. Having said that, as I said, I think on climate, probably by the end of this year, a few months' time, we would have made our final substance decisions. So anyone would know where we are going. It would be fixed. Then there will still be, I think, a number of details, translations, many things that need to happen before the final standards are there. But they will be there somewhere early in 23 when it comes to S1 and to S2 climate. Then we are working already on the endorsement of those standards by IOSCO. It will take a bit of time, but IOSCO has always been very supportive and looking positively at endorsing our standards. So basically, I think next year, we are going to be in a situation somewhere next year for companies for jurisdictions to really start thinking about their adoption. And to the specific point of Japan, already SSBG, the Sustainability Standard Board of Japan, was created, I think, as soon as ISSB was announced. I mean, in December last year already, Japan was one of the first to create that, and it's chaired by Nobu Kawanishi-san. We have Nobu and others from Japan, from FSA and SSBG, around a table of jurisdictional working group now of 5 key jurisdictions, and Japan is one of them, that meet every month to discuss the agenda, how best, where the opportunities for alignment are, what are the roadblocks, the governance, how each of them are organized, etc., etc. So, that's where I am, and we are trying to support and to listen as much as possible from jurisdictions and, of course, from Japan about all of this. And by the way, by the end of this month of October, I'll be in Tokyo meeting a lot of our stakeholders, and I really look forward to that, to continue to engage with the Japanese stakeholders of our mission, because it's a critical jurisdiction for us, as you know.
Well, thank you very much. Each time I speak with Mark Carney and Mary Shapiro and Michael Bloomberg, they always say the Japanese, the government and business community, all together determined to promote the TCFD, through these kind of TCFD summit. It was really, the game changer. So I'm hoping even for ISSB, the Japanese business community and the Japanese regulator can play the same role. And I'm really glad to hear that they are already trying to, gather to make the jump start. And, hopefully their work on the TCFD really provide them with sort of the preparation for this important, the work being made by you. And I'm really glad to see the Japanese government and the FSA and METI are supporting. So I think we already spoke more than 20 minutes, and then we covered quite a wide range of the topic. But I really, believe that your leadership will really make a difference. And I know you genuinely believe in the importance of this work. And then, in the middle of the Ukraine, crisis and all those inflation challenges, there will be a lot of hiccups, and some people trying to be cynical about although we both agree that we have been too slow, but some people may say like, hey, we have been too hasty. And this is a good opportunity to really slow down. But I just feel like your leadership and the people and the resources you have will continue to push it rather than speeding up this rather than the slowing down. So congratulations again for your appointment. And I'm really looking forward to, working with you. And, I'll be excited that if the Japanese business community and these regulators can be your best, the allies.
Thank you. Thank you, Hiro. And thank you. I'm really, truly honored to be part of this event of the TCFD Summit. And as I really look forward to my visit in the next couple of weeks to Japan and to embrace all this very vibrant collective around the climate topics. We need everyone's effort. And to the Ukraine crisis topic, I think in many ways, it's also bringing the topic of our dependency on a number of, energy solutions, and whether even if we go back, that is not going to be enough to support us in the future. So the transition is also part of the solution to this part of these kind of questions. So really happy to have been with you. Thanks for all your leadership and your personal leadership, Hiro. It's always been a privilege and honor. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you.